Summary of Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher, William L. Ury, and Bruce Patton. Roger Fisher, William Ury, and Bruce Patton, who started the Harvard Negotiation Project, wrote a book called Getting to Yes about how to negotiate. In it, they recommend a technique called principled negotiation. A school to politics and marriage is made to get the best results and save time and energy. People have to deal every day in all of these fields, but they often end up dissatisfied, worn out, or alienated. Most people see negotiation as a process of positional bargaining, whether they are soft negotiators who give in to avoid conflict or hard negotiators who hurt relationships by being too stubborn about their points of view. They start by stating their stance and then try to find a middle ground with the other side. But this leads to answers that don't work, agreements that don't work, and broken relationships. Positional bargaining pushes people to take extreme stances, negotiate as stubbornly as possible to save face, and see agreements as needing only one side to make compromises. The goal of principled bargaining is to avoid these issues. The first main rule of principled bargaining is to separate the people from the problem. Positional trading forces people to choose between getting what they want in a negotiation and keeping their relationship with the other person, or getting what they want in a negotiation and losing their relationship with the other person. Negotiators with integrity keep relationships and issues separate. This doesn't mean you should just ignore personal problems and focus on work. Instead, you should be careful with misperceptions, feelings, and communication to improve personal relationships. Negotiators should fight their own views and try to figure out what drives the other side to get what they want. For example, if one side thinks a lot about a problem that doesn't affect the other side should work hard on this problem to build trust. Next, negotiators should be aware of their feelings and understand how each side's sense of autonomy, respect, affiliation, role, standing, and identity might affect what they are ready to consider or accept. Effective negotiators know how to let the other side vent their negative feelings without judging them. They also know how to build friendship through actions like praise and apologies. Lastly, they must always talk to each other in a clear and honest way. This means constantly listening and making sure you understand the other side's worries before misrepresenting them. The second rule of principled bargaining is focus on interests, not positions. People often go into talks with views, but what they really want is to get what they want. So, even if two sides take different stands, their goals can still be the same. Effective negotiators ask about the other side's interests with an open mind and then look for ways to meet both sides' needs. Instead of thinking about what caused a disagreement in the past, ethical negotiators look at what they want to get out of it in the future. During a discussion, the different sides should work together and not against each other. They should also take each other's interests seriously. The third rule of writing by writers is to invent options for mutual gain. Negotiations often feel like fights over a fixed pie of benefits where no one wins, but if leaders give themselves room and time to think, they can often find creative ways for everyone to win. During brainstorming meetings, people should talk about whatever they want, no one should criticize, and everyone should agree to put off making a decision. By helping the negotiators think of more ideas ahead of time, these meetings give them more options to work with during the real negotiation and help them figure out how to make proposals that the other side will be more open to. The fourth and last tip is to insist on using objective criteria. When competing interests come up in talks, people should put aside their own goals and make deals based on things like fairness, efficiency, or scientific merit. For example, a science model helped India and the United States agree on rules for deep-sea mining at the Law of the Sea Conference. Objective rules and methods can help people come to agreements. One cuts, the other chooses is a common way to split a dessert. In the end, it is always easier and more successful to negotiate based on objective ideals than on positions. The writers then show how principled bargaining can be used to solve common problems. First, when there is an excess of power, officials should know their BATNA, which stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. The BATNA shows how much it would cost to reach a deal, And it actually shows how powerful a party is in a discussion much more than money or influence can. But for the BATNA to be helpful, it needs to be a specific, doable plan B, not just an idea. Next, the writers give 2 ways that people who insist on using positional bargaining can be dealt with by people who have strong principles. The first is bargaining jiu-jitsu, which means not talking about the other side's points of view and instead focusing on your own. This can be done by asking open-ended questions and leaving deliberate pauses in a conversation. The second method is called the one-text procedure. In this method, a third-party referee makes a list of everyone's interests and then works with everyone to make a plan to meet those interests. The writers use a real-life discussion between a principled negotiator named Frank Turnbull and his rude landlord, Mrs. Jones, who had been illegally overcharging him, as an example of negotiation jiu-jitsu. Turnbull talks about the objective standard of fair price and makes it clear that he is not attacking Mrs. Jones's character or saying she did something wrong. When Mrs. Jones accuses him of trying to get her to do something she doesn't want to, Turnbull doesn't take it personally. Instead, he lets her make her case based on principles. He asks for a break on purpose so he can think, and the next day he comes up with a good idea that Mrs. Jones accepts without feeling cheated or confused. Lastly, the writers look at dirty tricks that people use in talks to get an unfair edge. These tricks only work if the other person doesn't fight back, and the best way for them to do that is to start a moral discussion about how to negotiate. For example, if one side agrees to a solution but then later wants more concessions, the other side should point out what is happening and cancel the agreement instead of giving in to the other side's demands. In the same way, if one side holds a meeting in a room that is freezing cold, the other side can demand that the meeting take place somewhere else. The best way to deal with threats and pressure methods like the good guy/bad guy routine is to keep coming back to principles. In the end, the writers say that getting to yes is really just a way to organize things that most people already know instinctively but can only really learn through practice. They conclude that negotiation is about finding the best process for dealing with your differences, not winning or losing.
About the authors. Roger Fisher, William Ury, and Bruce Patton all started out in different fields of work, but they all ended up at getting to yes because of the Harvard Negotiation Project. After watching the weather during World War II as part of his job, Roger Fisher chose to spend the rest of his life trying to stop wars. He went to Harvard Law School and then worked for the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe and the Department of Justice in the United States. He then taught for more than 40 years at Harvard Law, where he was one of the first people to study how to solve conflicts as an academic field. Fisher also helped to mediate some of the most important peace deals of the 20th century, such as the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt, the negotiations that ended the Salvadoran Civil War, and the negotiations that ended apartheid and set up democracy in South Africa in the early 1990s. William Ury became a social scientist at Harvard. There, he learned how to use the field's awareness to differences in culture and point of view to help stop conflicts all over the world. He started working with Fisher when he was a graduate student. He later wrote a dissertation about labor issues in a Kentucky coal mine, but his career has always been about resolving conflicts. He has worked to stop fights in Colombia, Indonesia, the former Yugoslavia, and the Soviet Union, among other places. He also started the International Negotiation Network with former U.S. President Jimmy Carter. Since then, he has started the Abraham Path Initiative, which supports hiking in the Middle East as a way to solve social and religious tensions. Bruce Patton taught at Harvard Law School for a long time, just like Roger Fisher. He was the book's editor at first, but on the second and third versions, he also wrote parts of the book with other people. He now runs the Boston-based management consulting firm Vantage Partners. The Harvard Negotiation Project is still promoting the area of conflict negotiation studies, both in universities and in the general public.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.